All right, we got a 5 sheet today for this CNN article. Let's see what fakery is going on here. We'll start out with the headline as they write it. Trump goes on a rampage with pardons, veto threats, and COVID denial. So, what is that, a fact or opinion? That is definitely an opinion. That headline. He goes on a rampage. That's not a provable or disprovable fact. That's clearly an opinion. So, how do I paraphrase that? Trump's pardons, veto threats, and COVID denial constitute a rampage. So, uh, first of all, this is going to be one of the biggest issues with this article. This was their main page. You go to the CNN headline, top of their lead story is this thing here, and it's not labeled as an opinion, but this is clearly an opinion piece. So let's keep that in mind. All right, we're gonna now look at the bias CNN. So I have it as establishment left, and we're gonna now find the thesis. It's a little bit blurry. I guess you could say it's maybe in these first two paragraphs, but it's mostly in that first one. I said this was an opinion again. I paraphrased it. Trump's presidency is ending in a manner befitting his negative qualities: pardons, attacks on democracy, and demanding bigger stimulus checks in an unconventional way. Uh, so, what evidence do they have supporting this? It's a little hard to know how you support an evidence like that. Like, what evidence will there be that it's blazing into history in a way that epitomizes his corrupt excesses? That's, again, clearly a statement of opinion, not something that you're going to have proof that it's yes or no on. You might have some stuff that kind of pushes it in that direction, but you're never going to have direct evidence showing that that's true. So, did he issue pardons? Yes. Were they for cronies and war crimes? That part they do not provide evidence on. So, it's a little blurry in terms of evidence supporting thesis because, again, that thesis is mostly opinion. So, any evidence is going to be, blurry opinion type stuff as well. All right, let's look at the outline of this article. This was kind of long, rambly piece, so there might have been some stuff I missed in here. But what I had, they start out with that thesis we just discussed. Then they talk about how Trump is making it difficult on his Joe Biden, his successor. They talk about some of the pardons coming up. Then talk about Pence getting the vaccine and the overall response. Uh, they then talk about this Washington bombshell, how Trump wanted bigger checks and some other changes to that bill. They talked about the impact that Trump's new demands might have, how it might blow up that bill, how, this carefully negotiated thing might be destroyed. Blah, blah, blah. Some more ramifications of that threat about how, it might hurt McConnell. So they have some more stuff on that. And then they have this piece about Biden filling the leadership vacuum. That has a couple different little segments. Uh, he's stepping in there saying the things Trump won't say about how, darkest days are ahead, everything's bad. And then he criticizes Trump about the cyber attack. And then the final section in this article is just a little more detail on all of those pardons. All right, we're gonna move now to the named manipulation tactics here. all the ones on this list. There were a few of them, starting out with poison the well. Let's look at that definition really quick. When an author aims to discredit a source of information instead of assessing the credibility of that information, right? So there is a productive way to do that. If someone has a history of reporting false fires and then they come and say, hey, there's a fire, it might be good to know that that guy has been convicted of reporting false fires 30 times in the past 2 years. That might help you know how to respond to their report that there's a fire happening. But it's often used in a more manipulative way. Like the defendant falsely denies murdering those people before explaining whatever the defendant's argument is. Here you could say, the defendant denies murdering those people. His claim was this or that. But by inserting falsely, that triggers the reader's confirmation bias. Because as soon as you think the defendant falsely murdered those people, then all their claims about the alibi, about the forensics, that's all just part of that false narrative the defendant has. Once that well is poisoned, anything coming out of it is poison. So that's how that tactic works. Let's see how they used it here. It was actually used a lot throughout this article. A couple of the ones I picked out. One of the ones is right at the very beginning. Donald Trump's presidency is blazing into history in a way that epitomizes his corrupt excess. So, that right there is gonna color everything else that comes down. Everything you read after that is about, just corrupt excesses. All of these, when some people might argue that Trump is trying to get bigger checks into the pockets of Americans. But with this tactic starting out the article, when we get down to Trump making that demand, it's going to feel a lot more just like one of his corrupt excesses when he's making that demand. Another one, the sleazy final days of the Trump White House, right? So there's a lot of that language inserted all throughout this article, which again is more evidence that this is clearly an opinion piece. This is not worded in an objective manner. All right, next one up, false citation. Pull up the definition on this guy. When an article has words or phrases that are hyperlinks, but if you follow the link, it does not provide evidence for the assertion being made. They put these in because most readers are not going to follow the link, but you see the link and your subconscious assumes that there's at least some evidence supporting whatever they're saying on the other side of the link. So this is fairly commonly used. Let's see what they did near the beginning here. With pardons for cronies and war crimes. So you look at that article, and it talks about him, some of the different pardons. I guess cronies is a kind of subjective word. So some of those guys were political allies of his. I don't know what you would do to prove whether or not they were quote-unquote cronies. But the war crimes thing did not feel well evidenced from that article. The closest thing was that it was saying one of the reports said the way the shooting went down was not justified under whatever rules of engagement those contractors were under at the time. Certainly they have their defenses. They claim that, witnesses' statements were wrong. They claim that they were fired at first. So it did not give a lot of detail. It didn't even say exactly what crimes they were convicted of in that article. So there was some talk about stuff in there that kind of sounded war crime-ish. But if you click on the link right here, You certainly don't read that article and come away like, oh, those guys definitely committed war crimes. It is very. So I guess you could say there's some evidence in that article that they committed war crimes, but very weak, very weak. All right, straw man feigning ignorance. Pop through this definition really quick. This pretty easy one. Anytime an author admits, material fact or relevant argument. That's really what it is. Uh, you know, for the straw man side, there might be multiple arguments that are being made. So the best practice is to do what's called steel manning, where you pick the strongest argument from the other side, and that's the one you discuss. But if you choose the weakest one, that's what's known as straw manning. If you just pretend that no argument exists, like, what are they even thinking? It's baffling. I can't even understand it. That's getting into the feigning ignorance territory. But the feigning ignorance is also just omitting material facts, where you say, their argument doesn't even make sense because blah blah blah. But what you're not saying is that it does make sense because of X, some factor which you chose to leave out of the argument. So let's see the way they're using it here. They had this quote: no modern president has so defiantly used the privilege for political ends. They're talking about the pardon here. No modern president has defiantly used the pardon privilege for political ends. So that really didn't feel like it gives us much information without some kind of baseline to compare it to. I do remember Clinton was criticized for his usage of pardons. Is this worse? Maybe it is. It very well might be. But, to what extent? Is it worse by magnitude? Is it worse by, is it a different type of usage? Is it just more pardons? They didn't give us anything to compare it to. It's just saying, boom. That statement right there felt like we're not getting the full argument. Okay, let's move on to this final section. I think the most problematic issue with the article is that this is clearly an opinion piece. It was not labeled opinion. I see facts first. I don't see anything here that says it's an opinion piece. It was not placed where an opinion article would be placed. You go to CNN.com, this is at the very top. This is their lead story. That's usually the top news of the day. That's not the particular or personal opinion of some particular writer, which is what they did here. And I think this was intentionally done to conflate opinion with fact and leave many viewers with the impression that many of the opinions in this article were actually factual pieces of news. Stuff about him blazing into history in a way that epitomizes his corrupt excesses. That is an opinion, but a lot of readers are going to walk away thinking they just read the news. They didn't just read some guy's opinion. They're going to think that was the news that some guy's reporting on. This is, a hallmark of CNN. Like Don Lemon, is he an opinion guy or is he an anchor? Anderson Cooper, Chris Cuomo. Same is true of all those guys. They really blur the lines between objective reporting and opinion analysis. All right, what else is going on here? This one was another piece of evidence just about the partisan nature of this article. They had this quote: Vice President Mike Pence, a day after getting a coronavirus vaccine available to only a tiny fraction of Americans. So, that is the reason I point that out is because what we've been seeing a lot of recently is how Trump is being criticized for not getting the vaccine, because it sets the wrong example or something like that. And here Pence is getting criticized because he is getting it, due to privilege, I suppose, because it's only for a tiny fraction of Americans. So that type of partisan attack is what you would expect to see from like a politician, where whether he gets the vaccine or doesn't get the vaccine, you're going to find a way to attack the other side. That's just the nature of the business. But it's not what you would expect from an objective news reporting organization. So this line right here is just another piece of evidence that what we're reading right here is not an objective piece of news reporting. This is a partisan piece of advocacy. So let's just keep that in mind when we're reading it. And the last little thing I had, this little note caught my eye. The article is treating that recent cyber attack as certainly committed by Russia. They didn't say anything about likely committed by Russia. That's all the official sources I've heard is saying, indicate everything is indicate or has the indicators pointing towards Russia, language like that. What they're saying in here is just a cyber attack committed by Russia. So, was there some new information that came out? Like, was, some report released saying, oh, we found the clues. It definitely was Russia. Or did CNN just change the language? Did they just start saying this, you know, guidance given by the intelligence community? Are they just starting to say, like, well, it's been a week or two now. We're going to start just treating that as certain fact? So I don't know exactly how that change came about, but it was in there. So that's another interesting note. All right, that's what I got for this one. It it was a pretty long article. Could have been some stuff I missed in there. Feel free to fill out your own 5 sheet on this one. I'll leave a link in the description. Let me know if I missed anything. And if you have any articles you want me to run a 5 sheet on, you can put that in the comments too, and I will take a look. All right, thanks.